the G3 Bullet, the G4 Bullet, and the G5 Bullet. Yes, I have got a G5 Bullet that we're going to set up in this video. And again, if you didn't see the last video, we put up this switch flex cabinet and flex switch. God, it's hard to say. Switch flex switch. Anyway, which is in here. So we're going to hook the G5 Bullet up to that switch and then mount it just up here so that you can look at this sort of outdoor-indoor area. Like the front of this is open, which is why it needs to be an outdoor rated camera, as well as the switch is outrated. Outdoor rated. Speaking is hard. So this is an interesting device because, as we'll get into more detail later, it's like a evolution of the G4. It's not necessarily an upgrade of the G4 Bullet, but it's lighter, it's cheaper, it has a slightly lower processor, but it runs higher frame rate. So it's all a bit sort of an improvement of what we had. But let's look at that in more detail when we look at the specs between them. And then at the very end, so stay tuned, we're gonna look at actual image quality between the G3 Bullet, G4 Bullet, and the G5 Bullet. The whole evolution of those, which will mount up here so that we get almost the same shot of this area in here in the shed. So that should be interesting. I'm not sure exactly what to expect, if I'm honest. But first, let's see what's in the box, which is not a surprise, it's a camera. And then we'll install it up here and put it into the Unifi Protect app and have a look at some images. So here's the box. Let's take this thing out of it. It's very light. It doesn't weigh very much, but we'll get to that. It feels like there's not much in it. But yeah, let's see what's in the box. So this is, again, this new light gray color that the G5s are coming in. And then it has this new packaging, which I quite like, to be honest. It's kind of a reveal almost, if I can get it out. So you take it out like that. And then this, you sort of, it's quite nice. But that's the G5. So this is a similar packaging to the G5 Pro that we did in the other video. This is a smaller camera. So this is a much smaller unit. This doesn't weigh very much. Anyway, that is now a 100 megabit connection, not gigabit anymore. So that's probably a cost saving thing. It doesn't matter for your image quality. It's going to make no difference whatsoever. And then we have the mount. Again, oh, this is all a polycarbonate, aka plastic. So this is very light. It doesn't weigh anything at all. But yeah, so you put the cable in through here. You have a grommet to make sure that it seals tight, watertight or weather tight. And then you attach the camera to it here, like that, and on this on the other end. And that's it. And then if you do have a pole mount, or so this is the one you attach to the wall. That goes in through here, rather. And if you do have a pole mount, or pole you want to mount it on, you use this thing here, which is obviously a pole goes on there. Many ways. But that's pretty much it. There's some screws and fasteners. There's the rubber grommet here that you need to put the cable through. So that's very tight, as it should be. And some screws for putting it up. But that's really it. So let's install it up there on the wall, and then we'll go into Protect and adopt it and see what's what. And then the rubber grommet, as always. This is really important because otherwise the whole camera is going to be exposed to moisture and dust and whatever. So you've got to get this right, and you've got to get it the right way. And I always get this wrong. So I'll just test. It goes in that way, which means that the cable has to go through that way. All right, so don't forget that. Super important. All right, well that's on. It's tricky getting that rubber grommet just right with the right length of cable, etc. But yeah, it's worth, you've got to get it right. So I'm going to plug this in down to the switch flex, and then we'll go and have a look. First we'll have a look at what has actually changed between the G4 and the G5 Bullet, and then we'll adopt it into Unifi Protect, and then we'll do the big comparison of all three. So before we adopt the G5 Bullet, let's just have a look at and compare it to the G4 Bullet. I did a similar comparison in the G5 Pro scenario where there was the G5 and G4 Pro to compare. So it's kind of interesting. So the first thing that I can sort of see, obviously, is the price. The G5 Bullet is significantly cheaper, $129 versus $199, which is a welcome change because currently it seems like everything is going up in price, and Unifi has actually found a way to make this go down in price for essentially the same camera. But let's have a look at a bit more detail on that. So both cameras are 2K 4 megapixel in resolution. They both have a flexible 3-axis adjustable mount. As we'll see, I'll probably have to adjust the camera in a minute because I'm not sure where I put it up. They both have 9 meters of IR range, so that's compared to the G5 Pro that has 25 meters, which is significantly more. And it has AI event detections, that's your vehicles and your people. The AI camera range has more AI detections, I believe. I haven't actually tried those cameras yet. And they're both powered by PoE. And that's basically it for now. They look exactly the same on paper or overview. So let's scroll down and have a little bit more of a look in here. So we have some build features here. And you can see here that there's one change. Well, there's two changes really, but there's one change in particular which was also stood out to me for the G5 Pro, and that is that they've changed the RJ45 port to being 100 megabit or FE speed instead of gigabit speed. And it's an interesting change. I'm guessing it makes it cheaper to produce. I'm not sure, but it certainly does make a difference to image quality. Like you can easily stream this 2K 30 FPS video over 100 megabit connection, no problem. And speaking of FPS, frame rate, the G5 has 30 frames per second. The G4 is 24 frames per second, which is interesting because the G5 Pro went down in frame rate from 50 to 30. So the G5 Bullet has gone up. And then we have the mount itself, which is weatherproof IPX4, which means that this particular mount hasn't been tested for dirt or for particulates, just for water. And the 4 in this case means that it's waterproof from splashing from all angles. Right, so it is perfectly good in the rain. The G5 Pro is IP65, so it's tested for dirt ingress, and water ingress is at 5, which means it's more like a jet, so you can put more pressure on the water that doesn't come into the camera, I guess. All right, and then the tech specs finally. This is where there's a couple of interesting bits, so let me just line them up here. First of all, the weight. The G4 Bullet, 520 grams, half a kilo. The G5 Bullet, 225 grams, so it's less than half. The enclosure is all aluminium alloy on the G4, and on the G5 it's polycarbonate or plastic and aluminium alloy, and it just puts the weight down, and I think that's a big cost saver as well, which is why they can make it cheaper. And then the rating is the same, so IKO4 for resistance, that is just impact resistance, so it's not vandal proof, but it'll withstand, leaves and sticks and rocks sort of getting blown at it. Should be fine for that. If we go down to the optics, it is the exact same sensor on paper. I am not sure if my 5 megapixel CMOS sensor is just a generic term for a type of sensor. I'm not that much across it, but the view angle has changed. So the G4 Bullet had a greater view angle. You can see 86 horizontal degrees, 60 vertical, and 111 for depth, D, where now that is slightly less. I don't think it's going to make much of a difference in practice, but it is less. And then here's the frame rate, 24 frame rates per second, and the G5 is 30, which is interesting because if you go down to the system, which is down here, and just again line them up, you can see that the old one had a quad-core AIM Cortex A53, so older architecture of chip, but quad-core, and the new one is a dual-core A7-based ARM chip. So Newer chip but less cores, yet they have higher frame rate. Interesting. I don't know. Put it in the comment if you know if that has any impact. But yeah, it could be. And then I just realized that the temperature is still the same, but it goes up to 40 degrees. And where I've mounted it in that shed, I reckon it gets above 40 in summer. But that'll have to be a practical test, and we'll see if it survives. I think it will. I think it'll be fine. But yeah. Okay, so that's the comparison between the G4 Bullet and G5 Bullet on paper. So let's put the G5 Bullet into Unifi Protect. And you can see that it's already ready to add. Ready to add G5 Bullet. I'm just going to go to Protect, and I'm just going to go to the cameras here, and we can see it. There it is, G5 Bullet ready to add. Right, so I have two G4 bullets, which we'll compare in a minute. And here's the G5. So I'm going to click on that, and we're just going to adopt that into Unifi Protect. G5 Bullet's up, and there's already a picture. Yay! So you can see that's roughly the shed that it's in. I probably need to adjust the angle a little bit. But anyway, there's a couple of cars and a whole bunch of shed stuff, tools and whatnot. Preparing update. So this is going to now update as well, because that's how Unifi Protect updates cameras automatically. If you update Protect, the version of the cameras have to be the same as the Protect app. So it just does that. And when that's done, then we'll look at some of the features and settings. Alright, so the camera is now updated and adopted and ready to go. So the first thing, as always, is I'm going to rename this camera. We're going to call this Machinery Shed, because that's where it is. And if you saw the Switch Flex video, I also named that Machinery Shed Switch. So that makes sense. And then we'll just apply those changes. And then while we're in here, as always, you can adjust the camera picture. In this case, so you can see it's a bit clearer here. There's the dog. Hi, dog. You can change the brightness, the contrast, the hue, the saturation, etc., etc. So if it's not quite what you think, so you can see in this case, it's quite good inside, but the outside doesn't show very well because there's a lot of light. Maybe you want to have that better, so you adjust it. You know, you can adjust the brightness or whatever, like this, like this. I tend to leave them as default because it's usually all right, but you can fiddle with all of these different settings for it. HDR is on, yeah. HDR, I tend to leave that on. It's quite nice, so that you can adjust the picture to your heart's content. So we click done, and we'll close that. And then there's the microphone. As always, you can disable the microphone, or you can dial down the sensitivity if it's a bit too loud or whatever. The night vision, which we will test. I'll come back. You won't have to wait, obviously, but I'll come back tonight and do a test of the night vision for all three cameras as well. G3, G4, G5. Night vision, always disable. I'm going to put it on auto because I like having the infrared on here. And then here's the new feature. If you haven't been across Unifi Protect for a bit, you can share a live stream with a link. So if you check this link here, Unifi Protect will generate a link for you that you can share with anyone on the internet, and they can then see the live stream of that camera, but only one at a time. It's a bit like RDP. You get kicked off. So it's one person at a time, as it says here. Only one viewer is allowed to watch at a time. I'm not going to enable that, but you can. Really neat. If you have, if you want to show your parents something remotely, or if you got to keep an eye on something, whatever it might be. Advanced is always the RTSP, so that's the real-time streaming protocol. If you need to have a feed out of the camera that you can use for something, I've used it for my llama cams. And then manage is just the restart and the remove as always. So that's pretty simple. That's very similar. I'm just going to apply that. Very similar to the other cameras and the other Protect modes. The recording mode, here we can have global configuration for all the recording settings, which is recommended. I would say that. So that's continuous recording, motion detection, those sort of things you can have for the same for all cameras, or you can have a particular camera use just specific custom settings outside of the global. But I tend to leave them on global. Most of it is all right. And that's why all of this is grayed out. So if I were to say not use them, all of this would be no longer grayed out, and you can then configure this manually instead of using the global settings. Go back to using global settings. Thank you. And then on here is recording quality. So if you have a smaller hard drive or you don't need as big quality, you can dial this down, the frame rate and the image quality. I like high quality images. I'm a visual person, so I just leave it there. And then overlay information comes from the global settings. I always have time and camera name on there. And then we have the detection of the privacy zones. I'm just going to edit the motion zone because I don't need that to be everywhere. Come on. In fact, I don't need to know about outside here. I just want to know what is going on inside the shed. So I just cut off the outside here because I don't need when cars are going past, etc. and all that. So I'll just leave it like that. Yeah. So that's my motion zone. I'll save that. Close that. Then we have smart detection zones. So that's your persons, people, and vehicles. And again, I don't need that outside because I have another camera that's for the outside bit. So again, we just take that like so, and that will now be my smart detection zone. And then we have these crossing lines. The idea is that if something goes from one side of a line to another side of the line, you get an alert or an event. So you can add a crossing line. Say if I wanted to know if anyone goes past, you know, from outside from there to there, that's the arrows going that way. I could then get an alert for that, which is neat. I haven't found a really good use case for them yet in my scenarios, but it is a very cool feature. And then we have privacy zones, which are if there's bits you will never want to record. So that could, for example, be a bathroom window or, I don't know, something secret, whatever. Stuff you don't want to film, you can then have a privacy zone, which is to always be black. So never records that. And that's it. So back to the overview. So the next thing that we're going to do is I'm going to go and I'm going to mount the G3 and the G4 bullet next to the G5 up on that piece of board. That's why I got the piece of board. And then we can compare the image quality of all three, both during the day and at night. So now we've got a little test bed. We have the G3 bullet, G4 bullet, and G5 bullet next to each other so that we can compare the footage that come out of them. They're not the same cameras, obviously, so they're going to be slightly different in the frame that we get, but they're pretty well aligned to be showing the same, so we can compare like for like, which might be nice. One thing I did notice when I put up the G5 bullet, which wasn't obvious when we compared it to G4 on the screen, is that the G4 and the G3 for that matter has a little port underneath, which is I think it's a mini USB, which allows you to put an II extender on the camera. The G5 bullet does not have that, so maybe that's why also it's cheaper. They might have saved that, or maybe there's another way to extend the IR. I'm not sure. And then another fun fact is that when I took the G3 down, it's down from my gate, they're sitting on the post. The first part of it, you know, the bigger part of it that sits on the post was full of wasps. It was a wasp nest. Yay! And the actual camera where you plug it in with the RJ45 port was an ant's nest. So you had ants and wasps. So I know the grommet, the rubber grommet is not working well, so I might replace it or figure out how to seal it better and somehow figure out how to not get wasps in it. Fun times. But let's go and compare the three footage of the three images that we get from these cameras, and we'll do it at night as well. So that would be interesting. Yeah. All right, off to that. So here are the three cameras that are side by side. Top left is G5 bullet, top right is G4 bullet, and bottom left is G3 bullet. And straight off the bat, I gotta say that the G5 just has better color depth and detail. Like, it looks so crisp compared to, say, especially the G4. The G4 just doesn't look as crisp at all. It looks sort of almost washed out. However, if you look at the like indoor versus outdoor, you know, when there's a lot of sunlight or daylight compared to an inside room-ish, like the shed is sort of more inside, you can see that the G3, the outside bit of it on the G3 bullet is just completely washed out. You can't really see anything out there. Whereas the G4, there's some definition, and again, the G5 just looks better. It just has better, I guess, consistent image across light and dark. So that, again, really nice. So you can definitely see the progression in technology. The G3 bullet is probably the one that is
the least good, and it's not bad. G4 is an improvement of that, and then the G5 is just a very big improvement in my book. It's a much better image quality. Now it is a slightly more fish eye because it has a wider angle. You can see our llamacorn pool toy. That's the pink one on the left there, on the top left image. So you can see there's more. You can see more space as well, which does mean you get more of a fisheye effect. So up to you if you like that or not. But it's definitely a better image. So for daylight footage, the G5 is definitely the way to go, in my opinion. So let's jump forward a few hours and have a look how it looks in the dark. It is now a few hours later. It's about 7:38, as you can see on the cameras here. It's gone dark, and again, the G5 on the top left here just stands out. It is much clearer image. It seems crisper. It has about the same range as the others in terms of IR, inside the shed at least, that we can see. The outside has a tiny bit of ambient light from a couple of outdoor lights, but it's not much. So they're all performing really well, especially in this room, and they all have about the same distance of about 9 meters as far as I can figure out in terms of IR range. But again, the G5, it just looks crisper, it just looks more detailed, it looks sharper. So I think that's coming out ahead. And if again you compare them, it's $129 compared to $199 for the G4 Bullet. And yes, you don't get a gigabit connection, and yes, you get it made out of a composite material, or, a polycarbonate of some sort, but I just can't fault it. I think it's probably right now, in my opinion, it's probably the best buy for a Unifi camera that you can maneuver and gets really good quality images. It's not 4K, but we probably don't really need 4K necessarily, but for everyday cameras, this is a really good choice. So let me know what you think in the comments. Is there something I've missed? Would you like to see or hear about some other comparisons? I'm happy to make them. I can reply to your comment on that. In any case, if you like this kind of content, please do consider subscribing to the channel. There's a lot more coming. And in fact, the next video is going to be something completely different. But that's next time. So until then, bye. Blah, 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 blah. Out the box. Here, blah, 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 blah. Something.